Suspension in context of Baroque and classical music is more strict and follows set rules in order to be considered a suspension. These mandatory 3 rules are prepare, suspend, and resolve, which is also known as PSR. So here we have a P and an S, and we have 2 notes that are going to be the same note. Okay, so if I have my prepare and my suspend notes, let's say it's D, I'm going to be using the same notes for both. So it's going to be, that's my prepare and my suspend. And when S moves to R, we have to resolve by a step, usually downward. So we'd have D, D, C. And how is this a suspension? Well, it's because it's in context of working harmoniously over a bass line or a chord. Okay, so let's say the bass is playing a G chord or note at the moment. In this case, I'll just do a G note. Okay? And then while that G is playing, I'm going to have my D, which is going to create a perfect fifth, so it is going to be in harmony. But then I'm going to keep playing that D, again remember, a second time. But this time when I hit that D, I'm actually going to land my bass on C. So again, the first time I'm playing this D, I'm going to be playing G and D, and then I'm going to keep playing D, but then I'm going to go C and D, which creates a major second, which depending on your ear can be thought of as a dissonance. Okay, I'm going to play that D twice, and then I'm going to go down to my C. And what's going on here is in the bass, I'm going to do that same thing where I go from my G the first time, and then I go to C my second time. But now, I'm going to stay on my C when my other note goes from my D down to my C, which is going to create an octave of both of those and create a nice sound. So the first time what happened there was I played my G and my D, creating that perfect fifth, a nice little harmony. And then I played my D again, but I went down to a C, creating a not so nice dissonance. Then from there, I kept playing my C in the bass, but then I went down a step to my C, creating a nice octave consonance. So let's kind of hear what that would sound like. So as you might have heard, the first time they harmonized nicely, the second time it kind of mixed not so nice, and then the third time it mixed nice again, resolving that. So what happened was that D was suspended. It hung over from my G, and it was still ringing when I went to my C. And then when I went to my C again, now I went down a step, resolving that sort of sound. So it's sort of like D is hanging over the chord tone position that it would normally be in, and it hangs over into the next chord. So it's going G, D, and then it's hanging over into C. It's D is still here, but now we're in C. And then the next time now we're going C. Okay, now we're in C. So it's sort of hanging over from it's like still left over from the past chord we were using, and then it's sort of merging into an actual chord tone since it goes up or down a step to resolve into a chord tone. So to kind of go over that one more time, the P note is going to belong to the chord that is playing at the moment, our prepare. So the R note, the resolve note, will also belong to the chord that is playing at the moment, but the difference is that it will be a different chord than we had at P. And the S will be a dissonant note of the chord being played at the time. As you saw in my example, the S and the R, the suspend and the resolve, steps 2 and 3, can share the same chord, but the S must be a dissonant note of the chord being played at the moment, and the S must be the same note as P. If the suspension is not prepared, it would be considered an appoggiatura because we would leap from a chord tone to a non-chord tone, then we would resolve that non-chord tone by moving a step in the opposite direction from the leap to a chord tone. That is what an appoggiatura is. Okay, double suspensions are also a possibility and have been used in popular music such as J.S. Bach. we can form a suspension in an upper voice as well as a lower voice in counterpoint. If we move in harmony, this can be nice. But when trying to achieve polyphony, where multiple melodies are being heard as dominating, there would be a completely different approach from the method one would use in harmony. Harmony in melody is where there is a dominating voice, the melody, and then there's a harmony accompanying that. While in counterpoint, you're going to have two different voices that are both dominating, and you're both hearing them as the dominant voice. There's not one voice accompanying another. They're both their own voices playing their own separate melodies. And because of this, this is going to be in terms of counterpoint and not harmony. Okay, so for example, in my bass, I'm going to have the note G, and then in my alto, I'm going to have the note D, and then in my soprano, I'm going to have the note B. Okay? And from these notes, I'm going to suspend my D and my B, both of them, in the alto and the soprano. So I'm going to start with G, D, and B, and then I'm going to go over to C in my bass, but I'm going to keep staying on that D and B in my alto and my soprano. And that creates a dissonance right there, and it sounds kind of unresolved or dissonant. So now look at this. Now I go stepwise motion in contrary motion in both my alto and my soprano. So in my alto, I go down in stepwise motion. In my soprano, I go up in stepwise motion. So we are not only suspending, but we are suspending, and then we are creating a resolution of contrary motion to create 3 octaves. Okay, so to kind of hear what that would sound like, it's going to sound something kind of like this. So there's a double suspension. Since this is a double suspension, we got to analyze it twice. So the soprano has a P and an S of B. As you can see, the soprano has a prepare and a suspend of B. This creates a major 10th with G in the first step. So we have a major 10th, which is actually known as a consonance. And then C to B creates a dissonant major 7th in the second step. So in the second step, we have that C to that B, and now we have a dissonant major 7th. Then B finally resolves up a step to C, creating a consonant 8 or octave between the bass and the soprano in the third step. This is called a 7/8 suspension because there is the dissonant 7 resolving to a consonant 8. So as you see, that's creating a 7, that's creating an 8, so that's known as a 7/8 suspension. Okay, so the P and the S of the alto are also D, which creates a consonant perfect 5th in the first step. Then C and D create a dissonant compound major 2nd, also known as a major 9th in the second step. Then finally, D in the alto resolves down a step to C, creating a consonant octave between the bass and the alto in the third step. So this would be called a 9/8 suspension because of the dissonant 9 resolving to the consonant 8. So it might be kind of confusing because let's talk about the octave just for example. I'm calling this relationship an octave, which I'm calling an 8, and I'm also calling this relationship an octave, which I'm also calling an 8. But you might think, why don't I call it a 16 then if I'm going up those 16 notes? Well, that would just kind of make things confusing, and they're the same note, they're both C, so they're still going to function the same. So I'm just going to call it in correlation to what it is and the scale degrees. So it's an octave of the scale degree that we're using, but instead of calling it 2 octaves up, I'm just going to call it an 8. So just kind of talk about that a little more. I'm already calling C in the alto 8, which is an octave above the soprano, okay? So technically, the soprano C would be 2 octaves above this bass C. But But that would make the intervals of the other notes that we're using before all of this a lot more confusing to label and understand. The notes have the same diatonic function in the scale, they're just different octaves. Additionally, the soprano and the alto move in contrary motion to each other but still follow the guidelines for suspension. This creates a contrapuntal double suspension. Oh, this is just great.